for us to cancel.
What if the biggest enemy isn't the monster, but your own family? Today on Sonu Hub, I'm revealing the hidden facts and giving my honest review of The Huntsman Winter's War 2016. Stay till the end. You might discover details you completely missed in the movie. The Huntsman Winter's War is a 2016 American fantasy action adventure romance movie. It's made to work as both a prequel and a sequel to Snow White and the Huntsman 2012, making it a story that shows events from both before and after the first movie. This was also the first movie directed by Cedric Nicholas Troyan. The screenplay was written by Craig Mazin and Evan Spiliotopoulos, and the story is based on characters originally created by Evan Doherty. Several stars from the first movie returned to play their original roles, including Chris Hemsworth, Charlize Theron, Nick Frost, and Sam Claflin. The cast also welcomed some big new names, with Emily Blunt, Jessica Chastain, and Rob Brydon joining the franchise in important roles. The Huntsman Winter's War had its world premiere in Hamburg in March 2016 before hitting theaters across the United States on April 22, 2016. The movie was released by Universal Pictures. It received mostly negative reviews from critics after its release, but it still earned around $165 million worldwide at the box office against a production budget of $115 million. With the magic mirror under her control, Queen Ravenna is practically unstoppable. She conquers a kingdom by killing its king during a game of chess and quickly takes the throne with her younger sister Freya standing by her side. Ravenna tells Freya that every woman in their bloodline is born with magical gifts and that one day Freya's powers will awaken, just like hers did. Before Ravenna's downfall, she discovers that Freya has secretly fallen in love with Andrew, the Duke of Blackwood, and is expecting his child. Ravenna warns her that Andrew is already promised to another woman and claims he will eventually abandon both Freya and their daughter. After Freya gives birth, tragedy strikes when Andrew sets fire to their baby's crib while Freya is away. When she catches him, he says he had no choice. Heartbroken and consumed by grief, Freya's hidden ice powers finally awaken. She kills Andrew with her magic and unleashes abilities she never knew she had. Unable to live with her loss, Freya leaves the kingdom and travels north, where she builds a massive palace made entirely of ice. She creates her own frozen kingdom and turns the once beautiful northern lands into a cold, lifeless wasteland. Freya begins taking children from across the land, raising them as fearless warriors known as the Huntsmen. She teaches them that love only brings pain and completely bans it within her kingdom. Over the years, the children grow into elite soldiers, including Eric, Sarah, Tal, Pippa, Leifer, and many others. Under Freya's command, the Huntsmen defeat kingdom after kingdom, making her power grow stronger with every victory. Among her greatest warriors are Eric and Sarah, who secretly fall deeply in love despite Freya's strict rule against it. Sarah gives Eric a special medallion that once belonged to her mother, and together they plan to escape and start a new life. Before they can leave, Freya discovers their secret. Furious, she traps them with a giant wall of ice and uses powerful magic to make Eric believe he watches Sarah being killed by fellow huntsmen. Broken by what he believes he has seen, Eric is banished from the kingdom and thrown into a river barely alive. Years later, while Freya's frozen kingdom continues to grow, Ravenna's reign comes to an end after being defeated by Snow White and the Huntsman. 7 years after Ravenna's death, King William of Tabor finds Eric living as an outlaw. He explains that the magic mirror has disappeared. While being transported to a place called the Sanctuary, since Ravenna's dark magic still lives inside the mirror, Snow White wanted it hidden forever before anyone could use its evil power again. William believes Snow White has become mysteriously ill because of the mirror's influence. So he asks Eric, the best tracker he knows, to recover it before it falls into the wrong hands. Although he isn't eager to return to adventure, Eric accepts the mission. He travels with the dwarf Nyon and Nyon's half-brother Griff. During their journey, Eric realizes that Freya has been secretly spying on them through a magical mask that projects her spirit as a snowy owl. He destroys the mask and warns King William to prepare his armies along the northern border in case Freya decides to attack. Once Freya learns that Eric is still alive, she sends her huntsmen after him. She also wants the magic mirror for herself, knowing it possesses incredible power that could help her conquer even more kingdoms. Eric eventually finds the remains of the royal guards who had been transporting the mirror. The guards mysteriously killed one another, and Eric discovers a unique arrow covered with diamonds that doesn't belong to any ordinary bandit. He realizes another group has taken the mirror soon after Eric, Nyon, and Griff are attacked by Freya's huntsmen. Just when they are about to be defeated, Sarah suddenly appears and saves them. Eric is shocked to learn that she has been alive all along. Sarah believed Eric abandoned her years ago and has spent 7 years imprisoned in Freya's dungeons before finally escaping. She planned to find Eric and make him pay for what she believed was his betrayal. Eric explains that Freya tricked them both with powerful illusions, making each believe the other was lost forever. He tells Sarah he never stopped loving her, and the two finally reconcile and decide to work together again. As they continue their search, the group is captured by two female dwarfs, Bronwyn and Dorina. After talking things through, they convince the dwarfs to join their mission. By studying the unusual diamond-tipped arrow, they figure out that goblins stole the magic mirror after attacking the royal guards. Since goblins are famous for collecting treasure, Bronwyn and Dorina happily agree to help. Hoping to bring home as much loot as possible, the group eventually reaches the sanctuary where they battle the goblins and recover the magic mirror. During the fight, Sarah notices that Eric still wears the medallion she gave him years earlier, proving he never forgot her. Eric repeatedly risks his life to protect Sarah, and she returns the favor when she refuses to leave him behind. After escaping the goblins, the group camps in the forest and plans to return the mirror the following morning. That night, Eric and Sarah finally admit their feelings and spend the night together. However, the next day everything falls apart when Freya suddenly attacks and captures them. She claims that Sarah was only pretending to help them so she could lead Freya straight to the mirror. During the battle, Neon and Dorina are frozen into solid ice, and Freya orders Sarah to kill Eric. Sarah fires an arrow into Eric's chest, and Freya leaves with the mirror believing Eric is dead. What Freya doesn't realize is that Sarah deliberately aimed for the medallion she once gave Eric, allowing it to absorb the impact and secretly save his life. Back in her icy palace, Freya uses the magic mirror and performs a spell that causes golden liquid to pour from its surface. The liquid transforms into Ravenna, who reveals that before Snow White killed her, she secretly placed her spirit inside the mirror, allowing her to return when someone used its magic. Meanwhile, Eric survives and sneaks into Freya's kingdom with the help of Griff and Bromwyn. He tries to assassinate Freya but is stopped by Ravenna. When Freya discovers that Sarah never actually killed Eric, Ravenna convinces her to sentence both of them to death. Eric refuses to give up and reminds the huntsmen that they are more than soldiers, they are family. His words inspire many of them to stand against Ravenna and Freya. As the battle begins, Ravenna brutally cuts down many of the huntsmen. Watching her people die, Freya finally realizes that she truly cares about them despite everything she has taught them. She creates a giant wall of ice to shield the huntsmen from Ravenna, and the sisters begin fighting each other. During their confrontation, Freya learns the heartbreaking truth. Ravenna had secretly cursed Andrew, forcing him to kill Freya's baby, because Ravenna feared the child might one day become more beautiful than she was. Furious after discovering her sister was responsible for everything, Freya turns against Ravenna and joins forces with Eric and Sarah. In the final battle, Freya is mortally wounded, but before dying, she freezes the magic mirror, giving Eric the chance to throw his axe and shatter it. The destruction of the mirror also destroys Ravenna's spirit once and for all. As Freya takes her final breaths, she sees Eric and Sarah together and quietly tells them they are lucky before peacefully passing away. With Ravenna finally defeated, the huntsmen and the people of the kingdom celebrate their freedom. Eric and Sarah are finally able to be together without fear, while Dorina and Nyon confess their love for each other, and Griff and Bromwyn also become a couple. As everyone celebrates their victory, a mysterious golden bird flies overhead, leaving behind one final hint that Ravenna's magic, or perhaps her spirit, may not be completely gone after all. Casting: Chris Hemsworth returned to the role of Eric the Huntsman, the central figure whose journey anchors the narrative across both the prequel and sequel elements of the story. Hemsworth had established the character in the 2012 film as a skilled warrior with a complex moral code, and his recommitment to the project was among the earliest and most decisive factors in moving the production forward. By the time development shifted toward a story that expanded Eric's backstory under Freya's rule and then followed his later efforts to recover the magic mirror, Hemsworth's availability and willingness to reprise the part provided a foundation of continuity that producers considered essential. His physical presence, already proven capable of carrying large-scale action sequences, aligned with the demands of a film that required extensive combat choreography, horse work, and outdoor location shooting in variable British weather. Interviews conducted during promotion revealed that Hemsworth had advocated for a lighter tonal approach compared with the darker atmosphere of the first film, and that preference influenced casting decisions around him. He specifically sought a co-lead who could match his physicality while bringing dramatic depth, and he identified Jessica Chastain as his preferred choice for Sarah. At an awards event, he approached her directly, outlining the character's strength and agency. Chastain responded that she would only consider the role if it allowed her to kick ass. a condition Hemsworth and the producers then ensured was met in the script revisions. This personal endorsement accelerated Chastain's attachment and illustrated how Hemsworth's star power extended beyond performance into active participation in assembling the ensemble. Charlize Theron likewise returned as Queen Ravenna, a decision that required creative justification because the character had been killed at the climax of the earlier film. The solution lay in the magic mirror's residual power, allowing Ravenna's spirit to re-emerge once Freya claimed the artifact. Theron's recommitment was driven in large part by her positive experience working with Hemsworth on the first production. She stated publicly that the prospect of collaborating with him again outweighed any hesitation about the character's previous demise. Theron's established ability to portray regal menace, combined with her physical commitment to the elaborate costumes designed by Colleen Atwood, made her indispensable for the dual queen confrontations that formed the emotional core of the later acts. Her presence also helped attract additional high-caliber talent, as the opportunity to share scenes with an Oscar-winning actress of Theron's stature functioned as a recruitment incentive. The chemistry between Theron and the newly cast Emily Blunt became a deliberate point of emphasis during pre-production, with both actresses preparing to explore the complex sibling dynamic of rivalry, shared trauma, and shifting alliances. Emily Blunt joined the cast as Queen Freya, Ravenna's younger sister and the ice-wielding monarch whose personal tragedy transforms her into a ruler who forbids love among her subjects. Blunt's casting was confirmed in early 2015 after weeks of industry speculation. Directors and producers sought an actress capable of conveying both vulnerability in Freya's early sequences and icy authority once her powers awaken. Blunt's recent work in action-oriented roles such as Edge of Tomorrow demonstrated that she could handle rigorous physical demands, while her dramatic range allowed her to portray the grief-stricken mother whose loss hardens into ideology. In interviews, she described the appeal of performing a queen of opposite Theron and of exploring a villain whose origins were rooted in genuine emotional pain rather than pure malevolence. Costume fittings for Freya's elaborate ice-themed gowns, some of which required multiple dressers because of their weight and complexity, further shaped Blunt's physical embodiment of the character. Her attachment solidified the film's central female power structure and provided a thematic counterpoint to Ravenna's more predatory magic. Jessica Chastain was cast as Sarah, the warrior raised alongside Eric in Freya's army and later revealed to be his wife. Chastain's selection followed Hemsworth's personal recommendation and her own insistence on a role defined by agency rather than domestic support. Once attached, she undertook intensive physical preparation. Universal arranged for a trainer to work with her in New York, after which she spent 3 weeks in London with the stunt team, refining a fighting style suited to her smaller frame relative to Hemsworth's. The choreography emphasized speed, leverage, and use of an opponent's momentum, allowing Sarah to remain credible in combat sequences while distinct from Eric's more straightforward power. Chastain's red hair and Celtic-inspired styling visually differentiated her from the icy palette associated with Freya and the golden excess of Ravenna. Her performance required both romantic intensity in the early forbidden love scenes and hardened resolve in the later confrontations, a dual demand that her dramatic background equipped her to meet. Nick Frost returned as Nyon, the dwarf who had aided Eric and Snow White in the previous film. Continuity with the first production was prioritized for this supporting role, and Frost's comic timing and established rapport with Hemsworth made him a natural choice for the expanded ensemble of dwarves. The decision to cast full-sized actors in dwarf roles, including Frost, generated discussion. Director Cedric Nicholas Troyan defended the approach by noting that the characters constituted a fantasy race and that the production wished to retain performers already familiar to audiences from the earlier film. Frost's presence provided a bridge of humor and loyalty that lightened the more operatic conflicts among the queens and warriors. Rob Brydon was cast as Griff, Ninon's older half-brother and a debt-collecting dwarf, whose dry wit and occasional self-interest added texture to the group dynamic. Brydon's attachment was announced in March 2015 alongside Sheridan Smith and Alexander Roach, forming a deliberate expansion of the dwarf contingent. His background in character comedy and improvisational work allowed him to develop Griff as both comic relief and a pragmatic voice within the traveling party. The casting of Brydon, a well-known British performer, also strengthened the film's appeal in the United Kingdom market, where location shooting took place. Sheridan Smith joined as Mrs. Bromwyn, a feisty and greedy female dwarf who becomes an ally to Nyan On and Griff. Smith's casting contributed to the gender balance among the dwarf characters and introduced a sharper, more opportunistic personality that contrasted with Nyan's relative idealism. Her theatrical training and experience in both comedy and dramatic roles enabled her to navigate the tonal shifts required of the supporting ensemble. Alexandra Roach was cast as Dorina, another female dwarf and Nyan's romantic interest. Roach's selection completed the core dwarf quartet and provided an opportunity for lighter romantic subplot material that balanced the heavier themes of betrayal and power. The three new dwarf actors Brydon, Smith and Roach were announced together, indicating a coordinated effort to populate the comic relief strand with performers who could generate ensemble chemistry on set. Soper Derisu portrayed Tool, one of the warriors raised in Freya's army alongside Eric and Sarah. Derisu's casting reflected a desire for physical authenticity and emotional range in the secondary huntsman roles. As a relatively newer face at the time, he brought freshness to the ranks of Freya's elite while contributing to the sense of a shared upbringing among the younger generation of soldiers. Sophie Cookson was cast as Pippa, another warrior from the same cohort. Cookson's prior experience in action-oriented material positioned her well for the thick combat sequences, and her presence helped establish the interpersonal bonds and rivalries within Freya's forces. Sam Hazeldine played Leifer, completing the trio of named secondary huntsmen. Hazeldine's solid supporting actor credentials and physical capability made him a reliable choice for a role that required both loyalty and eventual conflict. Colin Morgan appeared as the Duke of Blackwood, Freya's lover, whose betrayal precipitates her transformation. Morgan's casting capitalized on his established ability to convey charm and moral ambiguity, qualities essential for a character whose actions trigger the central tragedy. The role, though limited in screen time, demanded precision in establishing the emotional stakes that drive Freya's subsequent ideology. Robert Portal played the unnamed king, husband to Ravenna in the early sequences, providing the political backdrop against which the sisters' powers first manifest. Madeleine Worrall portrayed Eric's mother in flashback material, grounding the huntsman's personal history. Fred Tatasciore provided the voice of the Mirror Man, continuing the tradition of a distinctive vocal presence for the enchanted object. Ralph Ineson appeared as the barkeep, contributing his gravelly authority to a brief but atmospheric tavern sequence. Lynn Wilmot played the bar wench in the same setting. Younger versions of the principal warriors were cast to depict the childhood years under Freya's rule. Conrad Khan played young Eric, capturing the early promise and eventual defiance that would define the adult character. Naomish Walter portrayed young Sarah, establishing the formative bond that later becomes central to the plot. Nana Agiman Bediako appeared as young Tull and Amelia Crouch as young Pippa, ensuring visual and emotional continuity between the child soldiers and their adult counterparts. These juvenile performances required careful direction to convey both the indoctrination of Freya's ideology and the sparks of individuality that would later challenge it. Supporting and uncredited roles filled out the armies, courts, and villages. David Mumeni served as lead soldier, while O.C. Okerofor and Ryan Donaldson appeared as additional soldiers. Chinavodu played the huntsman lookout and Andrew Rothney a servant. Tim Delap was the huntsman guard. Anthony Achimpong, Ian Davies, George Watkins, and A.J. Bediako populated the ranks of huntsmen. Maya Wasowich appeared as the woman on cart, Sam Colson as a Snow White soldier, and Annie Guy as a little girl. Child performers including Yusuf Hofri, Eshan Gopal, and Natalia Colborne contributed to crowd and background sequences. Uncredited appearances included J.D. Duffield as a huntswoman, Liam Neeson as the narrator, Kristen Stewart in archive footage as Snow White, and Carl Ferrer as a huntsman instructor. Additional background players such as Lee Adak, Frederick Andre, Tola Bishi, Jack Brash, and numerous others completed the large-scale battle and court scenes. The casting process itself unfolded in stages. After Frank Darabont's departure from the director's chair in early 2015, Cedric Nicholas Troyan, previously the visual effects supervisor on the first film, assumed directing duties. Hemsworth and Theron were already committed. Blunt's deal closed shortly thereafter, followed by Chastain's attachment. The dwarf ensemble was locked in March 2015, and Sam Claflin's return as King William was confirmed in May. Casting director Lucy Bevan oversaw the assembly of both principal and supporting talent, balancing the need for star power with the practical requirements of extensive physical performance and location work. The decision to retain full-size actors for the dwarf roles was framed by the production as consistency with the established visual language of the franchise rather than a commentary on real-world dwarfism. Physical preparation was a significant component of the casting outcomes. Chastain's training regimen has already been noted. Hemsworth continued the intensive strength and combat conditioning familiar from his previous work in the role and in other franchises. Blunt and Theron both spent considerable time in costume fittings and movement rehearsals to master the restrictive yet visually striking gowns that Atwood designed. The secondary warriors trained as a unit to create a coherent fighting style for Freya's army, horse work, weapons handling, and stunt coordination under Ben Cook further filtered the available talent toward performers capable of meeting the production's physical standards. The ensemble's composition also reflected a deliberate emphasis on strong female characters, with Theron, Blunt, and Chastain occupying the three most prominent roles, and with Smith and Roach adding dimension among the dwarves. The film presented multiple models of female agency, villainous, ideologically driven, and heroic. This distribution of roles was frequently cited by the cast in promotional interviews as a primary attraction. Hemsworth himself remarked on the unusual experience of being surrounded by such a concentration of accomplished actresses, noting the collaborative and occasionally teasing atmosphere that developed on set. Geographic considerations influenced certain Supporting choices. British performers such as Brydon, Smith, Roach, Cookson, Morgan, and many of the background players aligned with the predominantly English shooting locations, including Waverley Abbey, Windsor, Great Park, Wells Cathedral, and Puzzlewood. This local casting reduced logistical complications and reinforced the film's European fairytale aesthetic. International stars Hemsworth, Theron, and Chastain provided the global draw necessary for a large budget fantasy release. The overall casting strategy therefore combined continuity from the first film, star driven recruitment of new leads, careful expansion of the comic ensemble, and practical attention to physical capability and location logistics. Each principal performer brought a distinct set of skills that the production then leveraged. Hemsworth's established franchise presence and physical reliability, Theron's regal intensity, Blunt's capacity for emotional transformation, Chastain's combination of dramatic depth and action readiness, Frost's comic continuity, and the newer dwarf actor's ability to generate fresh ensemble energy. Secondary and background casting filled the world with credible warriors, courtiers, and villagers, ensuring that the large scale sequences never felt underpopulated. The result was an ensemble calibrated to serve both the intimate character conflicts and the sweeping visual spectacle that defined the film's ambitions. Production development and pre-production. The road to the Huntsman Winter's War was long, winding, and marked by several changes in direction before the film that eventually reached theaters took shape. The project began life not as a prequel sequel hybrid but as a straightforward follow up to Snow White and the Huntsman 2012. With original director Rupert Sanders initially expected to return for a second installment, that plan didn't last. By August 2012, Universal had shifted its thinking, opting instead to pursue a spin off centered on the Huntsman character rather than a direct continuation of the first film's story. Confusion followed almost immediately. Within days of that spin-off report, the studio pushed back, insisting the traditional sequel had not been abandoned. Reports over the following months only added to the uncertainty. One account suggested Universal had greenlit a sequel with Kristen Stewart reprising her role as Snow White, though notably without Sanders returning to direct. His romantic relationship with star Stewart during production of the first film had become a publicized scandal that effectively ended his involvement with the franchise. A script had been completed and the studio was reportedly aiming to begin shooting sometime in 2013, targeting a 2015 release. That timeline slipped as film production timelines often do. In June 2014, entertainment trade outlet Deadline reported that Universal was considering a short list of directors to take on the sequel, naming Frank Darabont, Gavin O'Connor, and Andres Muschietti as candidates. Weeks later, Darabont, the filmmaker behind The Shawshank Redemption and The Walking Dead pilot, emerged as the frontrunner and entered talks to direct. It was around this point that the project's identity shifted again, and more permanently, rather than a conventional sequel picking up after the events of the first film. The new plan reconceived the story as a prequel, temporarily titled simply Huntsman. Crucially, this new version would not feature Kristen Stewart's Snow White at all. Stewart herself later addressed her absence publicly, stating that she had actually turned down an offer from the studio for a cameo appearance in the finished film, suggesting the choice to leave the franchise was as much hers as the studio's. Darabont's tenure as director proved short-lived. In January 2015, it was announced that he had exited the production entirely following a split with Universal. Despite the director's departure, the studio's commitment to its two biggest stars remained intact. Chris Hemsworth and Charlize Theron were confirmed to return as Eric and Ravenna, while Emily Blunt was reportedly being courted for a newly created role. Later that same month, Universal settled on a replacement, Cedric Nicholas Troyan, a visual effects specialist who had served as visual effects supervisor and second unit director on Snow White and the Huntsman, was announced as the new director. It would mark his feature directorial debut. The screenplay he inherited had gone through several hands, with Darabont's final draft building on earlier versions, written by Craig Mazin and Evan Spiliotopoulos, both of whom retained screenwriting credit on the finished film. As with the original film, the story drew on the Brothers Grimm's Snow White, but this installment also incorporated elements from Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, providing the narrative foundation for Emily Blunt's character. Freya casting announcements followed in quick succession once Nicholas Troyan was attached. Jessica Chastain signed on to play Sarah, a new character and Eric's love interest, while Nick Frost was confirmed to return as the dwarf Neon, a role he had originated in the first film. Emily Blunt, who had been rumored as a possible addition to the cast for some time, finally closed her deal to join as Freya, the Snow Queen and Ravenna's estranged sister. In March 2015, the ensemble grew further with the addition of Sheridan Smith, Rob Brydon and Alexandra Roach, all cast to play fellow dwarves alongside Frost's character, rounding out a comic ensemble that would provide much of the film's lighter tone. Sam Claflin's return as King William, Snow White's husband from the first film, was confirmed in May 2015, cementing the film's dual identity as both a prequel exploring Freya's backstory and a sequel picking up threads from the original story's aftermath, filming principal photography on The Huntsman. Winter's War began in April 2015 with production based primarily in England. Early filming took place at Waverley Abbey in Surrey, a historic ruined monastery whose atmospheric stonework made it well suited to the film's medieval fantasy setting. From there, production moved to Windsor Great Park, where filming continued from May through July 2015. The park offered several distinct locations that doubled for different environments within the story, including South of Forest, Johnson's Sons Pond, and the Deer Park near Snow Hill, giving the production a range of natural woodland and open landscape backdrops to work with. The crew also filmed extensively in the West Country city of Wells, making use of two of its most striking historic landmarks, the Bishop's Palace and Wells Cathedral, both of which lend grandeur and period authenticity to the film's royal and religious settings. Local news coverage at the time noted that the production had even constructed a fake castle as part of its set dressing in the area, underscoring the scale of the physical production design layered on top of these real-world locations. In July 2015, filming shifted to Puzzlewood, a gnarled ancient woodland in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire, known for its otherworldly, twisted tree roots and moss-covered rock formations, a location that has become a favorite among fantasy and science fiction productions for its naturally fantastical appearance, and one that suited the film's Goblin Forest sequences particularly well. Taken together, the production's location choices reflect a broader strategy common to big-budget fantasy filmmaking of the era, rather than relying purely on sound stages and digital backdrops. filmmakers sought out real English landscapes and historic architecture that could ground the film's heightened magical story in tangible, physically photographed environments, with visual effects layered on top during post production to enhance and transform what the cameras had captured on location. Post production, once photography wrapped, the film moved into post production, where its extensive visual effects work, unsurprising given a director who had built his career in that very department, was integrated with the live action footage. Given Nicholas Troyan's background as a visual effects supervisor, the post production phase carried particular significance for a filmmaker stepping into the director's chair for the first time, allowing him to apply his technical expertise directly to realizing the film's magical elements, from Freya's ice powers to the goblin creatures and the film's various fantastical set pieces. The finished theatrical cut ran shorter than its home media counterpart, and an extended edition was later prepared for the film's Blu-ray release, ultimately running 120 minutes, a version that restored additional footage trimmed from the theatrical release and gave audiences a more complete look at the film as edited beyond its initial cinema run. Music composer James Newton Howard, who had scored the original Snow White and the Huntsman, was officially confirmed to return for Winter's War in October 2015, ensuring a degree of musical continuity between the two films despite the change in director. His score for the sequel spans 21 tracks, ranging from brief, tension building cues under a minute in length to the sprawling 8.5 minute Stand or Fall Together, which serves as one of the score's most substantial set pieces. Track titles such as Freya's Spell, The Goblin Fight, Kill Him, and Ravenna Returns trace the score's journey through the film's major emotional and action beats, from Freya's tragic origin to the climactic confrontation between the two royal sisters. The complete score album was released on April 22, 2016, coinciding with the film's release in the United States. Beyond Howard's orchestral score, the film's marketing also leaned on a pop music tie-in. Singer Halsey recorded and released an alternate version of her song Castle, specifically to promote the film, accompanied by a dedicated music video built around the movie's imagery and themes. The collaboration extended to a live promotional appearance. Hemsworth, Theron, and Chastain took the stage together at the 2016 MTV Movie Awards to introduce a live performance of the song by Halsey herself, giving the film a highly visible promotional moment on live television ahead of its release. Theatrical Universal Pictures locked in the film's release date well over a year and a half before it reached audiences, announcing on July 31, 2014, that The Huntsman Winter's War would open in the United States on April 22, 2016. As the release date approached, the studio also finalized its international distribution plans. In February 2016, it was confirmed that the film would receive a 3D theatrical release in select international markets, including Germany. Poland's theatrical release was set for April 8, 2016, a date that aligned with the film's rollout across many other international markets, roughly 2 weeks ahead of its US debut. The marketing campaign began building momentum in the final months of 2015. On November 16, 2015, Universal unveiled 4 character posters spotlighting the film's principal cast and used the occasion to formally reveal the movie's new title, dropping the working title of Huntsman in favor of The Huntsman Winter's War. Just 3 days later, on November 18, 2015, the studio released the first official trailer paired with 2 additional teaser posters that expanded on the character artwork already released. A second trailer followed on February 11, 2016, offering audiences a fuller look at the film's story and action sequences as the release date drew nearer. Universal capped off its trailer campaign with a third and final trailer on March 22, 2016, roughly a month before the film's American premiere. The promotional rollout also included the aforementioned MTV Movie Awards performance, blending traditional trailer marketing with a splashy pop culture crossover moment designed to reach a younger demographic. The film ultimately premiered overseas before its domestic debut, holding its premiere in Hamburg, Germany in late March 2016, ahead of the broader international and US rollout that followed in April. Home media The Huntsman Winter's War arrived on digital HD in August 2016, with a physical media release on Blu-ray and DVD following on August 23, 2016. The home video release performed strongly out of the gate, with the film debuting at number 1 on the home video sales chart, a notable bright spot for a title that had struggled during its theatrical run. Alongside the standard theatrical cut, Universal also released a Blu-ray extended edition, packaged together with DVD and digital HD copies, which restored additional scenes to bring the film's runtime to 120 minutes, giving home audiences and fans of the franchise a more expansive version of the story than the one shown in theaters. Reception box office: The Huntsman Winter's War grossed $48. 4 million in the United States and Canada and 116.6 million NOM across other international territories, for a worldwide total of 165 million NOR, set against a production budget of $115 million. That box office performance placed the film firmly in box office bomb territory once the substantial cost of marketing and distribution were factored in. The Hollywood Reporter later estimated that once all expenses and revenues were tallied, Universal lost at least $75 million on the film, a striking figure for a film built around an established brand and a cast of A-list stars. Domestically, warning signs were visible even before the film opened. Early tracking had projected an opening weekend in the range of $24 to $30 million, a figure already substantially below the $56 $2 million opening notched by the regional Snow White and the Huntsman bag in 2012. The film opened wide, playing in 3,791 theaters across North America, and took in $7. $3 million on its first day, a total that included roughly $1 million generated from Thursday night preview screenings. When the full opening weekend tally came in, the result undershot even the lowered expectations, $19.4 million, representing a decline of about 64% compared to its predecessor's debut 4 years earlier. The disappointing opening triggered immediate financial consequences for the studio, with initial estimates placing Universal's losses in the $30 to $40 million range, and some later projections pushing that figure as high as $70 million once the full scope of the film's underperformance became clear. The international box office told a somewhat more complicated story. The film was ultimately released in a total of 65 countries, and pre-release estimates had suggested a possible international total around $150 million, itself already a drop from the original film's $240 million international haul. One factor working in the sequel's favor, however, was access to the Chinese market. Unlike Snow White and The Huntsman, which never received a Chinese theatrical release, Winter's War secured distribution there, a difference industry analysts believed could meaningfully affect the film's overall performance. The film opened internationally in 18 territories, a full 2 weeks ahead of its US release, earning $19.1 million from nearly 400 screens and claiming the number one spot in 11 of those markets, while ranking second overall on the global box office charts behind the superhero blockbuster Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. In its second international weekend, the film expanded into 7 additional markets and grossed $17.8 million, a comparatively modest 8% drop from its debut frame. Holding at number 2 behind Disney's The Jungle Book, it remained in second place for a third consecutive weekend as well. Individual market breakdowns showed China as the film's single strongest territory by opening gross, delivering 10.4 million lire, followed by the United Kingdom and Ireland combined at $4. 2 million, Brazil at 3.1 million on, Mexico at 2.8 million on, France at 2.6 million on, South Korea at 2.1 million on, Russia at 2 million on, the Philippines and Malaysia each at 1.6 million, Spain at 1.4 million and Thailand at 1.2 million. In China specifically, the film opened in third place, trailing both the local production Yesterday Once More and the continuing strong run of The Jungle Book. Its position in China weakened considerably in its second weekend there, as a wave of 3 new local releases, Book of Love, Phantom of the Theatre and MBA Partners, combined with the ongoing success of The Jungle Book to squeeze the film's screen count, dropping its weekend gross to just $710,000. When all international earnings were tallied, China proved to be the film's largest market outside North America by a wide margin, contributing $15.6 million in total, followed by the United Kingdom at $7.3 million and Mexico at $7.2 million. Critical reaction to The Huntsman. Winter's War skewed heavily negative upon release. On Rotten Tomatoes, the review aggregation site, the film held an approval rating of just 20% based on 220 collected critic reviews, with an average score of 4.3 out of 10. The site's official critical consensus captured the prevailing sentiment, succinctly describing the film as visually striking and well cast, but ultimately unnecessary as a continuation of the story told in the first film. Metacritic, which uses a weighted scoring system, gave the film a score of 35 out of 100 based on 41 critic reviews, a figure the site classifies as indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Interestingly, general audience reaction diverged somewhat from the critical consensus, at least in initial immediate response. CinemaScore polling conducted with opening night audiences gave the film an average grade of B- on the service's A+ to F scale, suggesting a more favorably disposed theatrical crowd than professional critics. However, more detailed audience data from Postec painted a slightly more nuanced picture, while the survey recorded a total positive score of 72%, encompassing audience members who rated the film as either very good or excellent. Only 49% of respondents said they would recommend the film to friends, a comparatively low word-of-mouth figure that industry analysts flagged as a warning sign for the film's ongoing box office prospects beyond its opening weekend. That gap between immediate enjoyment and willingness to recommend the film to others is often read by industry trade press as a predictor of weak long-term box office legs, and in this case, that pattern largely held, with the film's earnings dropping off relatively quickly after its debut both domestically and eventually internationally. Taken together, the critical and commercial reception paint a consistent picture, a film that assembled a genuinely starry cast: Chris Hemsworth, Charlize Theron, Emily Blunt, and Jessica Chastain among them, and paired them with striking visual production design, yet struggled to convince either critics or the broader movie-going public, that a further installment in this particular fantasy franchise was something audiences had been waiting for. The recurring critical refrain that the film was unnecessary echoed in the Rotten Tomatoes consensus and in numerous individual reviews at the time, became something of a defining characterization of the project, and it is a sentiment that aligns closely with the film's ultimate fate as one of 2016's more notable box office disappointments. Reviews number 1, The Huntsman Winter's War. Where to watch The Huntsman Winter's War Ront? The Huntsman Winter's War on Fandango or buy it on Fandango. What to know? The Huntsman Winter's War is visually arresting and boasts a stellar cast, but neither are enough to recommend this entirely unnecessary. Sequel critics reviews, audience reviews, my rating, cast and crew. Cedric Nicholas Troyan, director Chris the Huntsman, Charlize Theron, Ravenna, Emily Blunt, Queen Freya, Jessica Chastain, Sarah, Nick Frost, Nyan movie clips, The Huntsman, Winter's War. More like this. Videos, The Huntsman Winter's War photos, The Huntsman Winter's War movie info. Number 2, review gowns aside, The Huntsman Winter's War will kill you with boredom. Personalized content, Stephanie Zacharek. Follow this author to personalize your feed and get instant alerts. Why follow? Custom feed. See the stories that matter most to you, smart alerts. Get notified about major news as it happens. Update your preferences in account settings, film critic, personalize content, Stephanie Zacharek. Follow this author to personalize your feed and get instant alerts. Why follow? Custom feed. See the stories that matter most to you, smart alerts. Get notified about major news as it happens. Update your preferences in account settings, film critic. There's only one reason to see Cedric Nicholas Troyan's Crazy Cluttered, The Huntsman, Winter's War. The almost wholly unnecessary sequel, actually a prequel to 2012 Snow White and the Huntsman. First off, there's no Kristen Stewart in this one, so tick that off the list. You don't need to see it for the half Game of Thrones, half Middle Earth production design, and extravagant mingling of depressive forests and frosty ice migraine landscapes. You won't be missing much if you forego the I love you, I hate you, I love you romance between career fairy tale gothic warriors Eric and Sarah, Chris Hemsworth and Jessica Chastain, who toss one another about brutally before succumbing to the dull inevitability of romance. You don't even really need to see it for Nick Frost and Rob Brydon's turn as randy, wisecracking dwarves, though you wonder if, given just a bit more latitude, they might have subverted the movie's deadening squareness. No, there's only one reason to see The Huntsman, Winter's War, gowns, insane, off the hook, gowns trimmed with netting, grommets and spikes, gowns with enormous wing, gilt feathered collars, gowns that pour from the shoulder like liquid steel, gowns whose bodices look to have been made from pleated metal, embroidery, chainmail, jewels, metallic palettes, you name it, these gowns have it, further augmented by crowns as jagged as murder weapons, towering hair weaves that would make Marie Antoinette weep, and more dangly earrings than you'd find at 3 shopping malls worth of Claire's. Did I mention the heavy metal prosthetic talons? These outlandish creations, courtesy of veteran costume designer Colleen Atwood, nearly upstage the actresses who wear them. Charlize Theron and Emily Blunt, who star as royal sisters dueling for power. Chastain, because she's a warrior, gets no gowns and instead must wear drab, practical, forest-worthy leather jumpsuits. The Huntsman Winter's War tells the pre-Snow White backstory. Long before Snow came on the scene, Theron's Queen Ravenna was using her wicked wiles to grab kingdoms by the handful. In an early scene, we see her playing a lethal game of chess with an aged king while wearing nothing but a tiara and a sequin trimmed mini robe. Clearly, he's toast. Ravenna's greed and ambition ultimately alienate her from her sweeter, more straight shooting sister, blunts Freya. After the quintessential betrayal, Freya turns into an ice queen who can freeze stuff with her eyes. She also has a mask of ice feathers that turns her into an all seeing, all hearing owl. And she gets to ride a fearsome creature that looks like a cross between a polar bear and a tiger. I guess you'd call it a polar beaver. Advertisement. All of that makes the Huntsman. Winter's War sound like more fun than it is. Gowns aside, this thing's a snoozes. Events unfold tediously, and there are many scenes in which extras with dirty faces playing demoralized townsfolk mill about in a desultory fashion. In the end, this is your stock boring fairy tale fable about the battle between good and evil, between the haves and the have-nots. No wonder Blunt and Theron's gown-wearing sisters, definitely in the have camp, are the hands-down winners. Would you rather be them or the actor playing uncredited yurt villager? I rest my case. Number 3, Introduction. Book, Film and Comic Reviews, Book Review Index, AL. Book Review Index, MZ. Movie Review Index, Non-Fiction Review Index, Graphic Novels Index. Book Review Index, AL. Book Review Index, MZ. Movie Review Index, Non-Fiction Review Index, Graphic Novels Index, Drawings Gallery, Travel Adventures About Me, The Huntsman, Winter's War 2016 Show White, and The Huntsman 2012. The Huntsman Winter's War 2016 5.510. By this particular movie, we have suddenly entered the Snow White Chronicles, or more accurately, because Snow White herself doesn't really appear here, the Snow White cinematic universe perhaps. This film concerns the huntsman Chris Hemsworth, who was once tasked to kill Snow White in the fairy tale but didn't, in what was once a throwaway character in a short fairy tale. The huntsman is now given an origin story. It turns out that the evil Queen Ravenna, Charlize Theron, broke the heart of her sister Freya, Emily Blunt, who then turns into Elsa from Frozen. She flees to the north, becomes an ice queen, and makes an ice castle. Since she no longer believes in love, she forbids everyone in her new kingdom to love, no matter that her kingdom only ever seems to consist of about 100 people. Anyway, I suspect that because of the ban on love, no one is having babies. So Freya steals children to train them as child soldiers. These are her huntsmen. But wouldn't you know it, huntsman Chris Hemsworth falls in love with huntswoman Jessica Chastain, and they make love in a showy jacuzzi. Chastain was contractually obliged to appear in this movie via a deal with Universal, but she does a fine job, except for her fake Scottish accent, which also is a challenge too far for Hemsworth. The rest of the movie concerns a lot of twists and turns about love and trust and betrayal. The film feels small scale and a bit slow paced, with a thin story that is partly recycled from the first film. It loses itself a bit in little side gags with side characters, and although Nick Frost tries his best as a dwarf, the humor falls flat too often. Somehow the comedic tone doesn't fit, and generally the film feels like it is shot in only a handful of locations. It is basically beautiful people role playing. Hemsworth is charming, but his recurring problem is that he cannot carry a film as an involving protagonist. And the three actresses, Theron, Blunt, and Chastain, all outact him. I wish, though, that Emily Blunt had taken some more notes from Tilda Swinton and her White Witch in the Chronicles of Narnia. The film's biggest plus is some strong visual work. Although there are too many CGI animals thrusting their growling mouths into the screen, it has a palette of white and gold that mixes well also. The forests have some kind of Miyazaki fairy tale quality, with little sprites and wisps and some gorilla like goblins. Show White and the Huntsman, 2012, 6.5/10. I'm seeing these films backwards to be sure, but it is immediately apparent that this film has a much greater sense of scale and weight to it than its sequel. It has actual castle grounds that you could touch instead of computerized models, and lots of background actors so that you feel like you are looking at an actual populated kingdom. This is a much stronger start than the Huntsman 2016. Snow White is like a grim dark version of the original fairy tale, with the light and colors muffled so that it almost looks like black and white. Charlize Theron clearly has a lot of fun playing an evil queen. She hardly ever blinks her eyes and shows a barely repressed anger. It's good casting. It's a pity that 15 minutes into the movie, the character Snow White switches from the talented child actor Raffi Cassidy to the blander Kristen Stewart. I guess being locked away in a tower for 7 years muffles one's emotions. She also mysteriously has leather pants from the moment K-Stew escapes from the castle. Nothing makes much sense, but I recognize a handful of references to Lord of the Rings and the old Disney animation. The ending seems copied from Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, 2010. The darkness actually sucks the enthusiasm out of it for me. At least Hansel and Gretel 2013 had a light touch to it. So what we are left with are Chris Hemsworth and Kristen Stewart both acting like blocks of wood in an incessantly dull film where everyone falls into the medieval mud all the time. Stewart and Hemsworth are stubbornly thrown together into the same scenes for 2 hours as if to force chemistry between them, but it never happens. The visuals are all quite okay, with a nice swamp and a fairy forest and a nice troll and so on. Especially the fairy forest and the dwarves raise up the whole film a great deal, and suddenly it is worth paying attention to. But the hour it takes to get there feels like an eternity. Number 4 box office, The Huntsman, Winter's War can't match Jungle Book by James Rainey. James Rainey, senior film reporter, latest. Most consumers wouldn't pay $25 or $50 for day and date movies at home, survey shows 9 years ago. Jim Janopoulos nearing deal to be named Paramount Chairman CEO, EX6, 9 years ago. US Weekly sold to National Enquirer publisher AMI 9 years ago. The Huntsman, Winter's War is having a bear of a time competing with reigning box office beast Jungle Book, which is looking at a healthy $56 million weekend as it continues to win the lion's share of audience affection. The fairy tale prequel to 2012's Snow White and the Huntsman should pull in $7 million to $8 million Friday based on studio estimates, leading into an opening weekend total that could reach into the low $20 million range. The new interpretation of the classic tale will be at best a pale reflection of Jungle Book, Disney's reimagining of its 1967 animated classic, which opened last weekend, is expected to haul in $15 million Friday to jumpstart a $56 million weekend, according to estimates. Jungle Book, based on the Rudyard Kipling story and combining a live-action child with computer-generated animal characters, has won over audiences globally, bringing in a total of $377 million through Thursday night, with a reasonable shot to reach the $1 billion plateau before its run is complete, popular on Variety. Universal Pictures had hoped for better for The Huntsman, which opens in 3,791 theaters over the weekend, whose predecessor hauled in more than $56 million on its opening weekend. On its way to a $396 million worldwide take, the studio looked to women to bolster the audience, given the star power of Charlize Theron, who appeared in the last Huntsman film, and new to the franchise stars Jessica Chastain and Emily Blunt. More from Variety. Morgan Wallen returns to number 1 Charlie XCXon's top 3 debut on albums chart. Morgan Wallen returns to number 1. Charlie XCXon's top 3 debut on albums chart. More from our brands. Rolling Stone, Christopher Nolan's Odyssey goes big, really big to go home. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey goes big, really big to go home. Rob report how global private jet tours are changing group travel. How global private jet tours are changing group travel. Sportico DC opens bet on breakout tennis phenom Alex Iala pays off. DC opens bet on breakout tennis phenom Alex Iala pays off. WWD. Move over Beckcham's Slater, Zara Larson and more stars are taking trinkets to the hips. Move over Beckcham's Slater, Zara Larson and more stars are taking trinkets to the hips.